Ukrainian missiles reach the Urals, Russian conscripts are forced to sign contracts, and Russian commanders are demanding sex from subordinates at the front. Putin has a poison lab. That's exactly how he gets rid of his competitors. And Turkey could soon attack Israel. This is News Today. I'm Karina Kleishan, and we're starting. Donald Trump spoke for the first time about Orban's defeat. He stated that he's not worried about the election results at all. Now, the US president says he likes Magyar, adding that he's a good man and will work well. Trump doesn't know if things would have changed if he'd personally gone to Hungary to campaign before the election. And he claimed that he wasn't actually very involved in the matter. Even though Trump personally sent J.D. Vance there, he also wrote a bunch of posts and letters in support. So it turned out that Orban was dumped by both the Kremlin and the White House. His opinion on Iran is also changing by the hour. If I weren't president, the world would fall to pieces. That's exactly what the American president said. He also told reporters he's not considering extending the truce with Iran, as he sees no need for it. He said people will witness an incredible 2 days. He added that the US has already destroyed the radicals. And Ukraine has a new weapon that people need to hide from, not just in Moscow, but in the Urals. Hypersonic ballistic missiles that will bomb all the way to the Urals. Really? Yes?
Ukraine has secretly developed missiles that can fly 500 kilometers deep into Russia. And Defense Express experts report this, analyzing the statement of Deputy Fedor Venislavsky. This refers in particular to the development of hypersonic ballistic missiles. Analysts suggest such systems already exist, although their number is limited. Exactly when and against which targets they were used is unknown.
If such launches actually occurred, I do not rule out the possibility that they could very well have taken place in completely different and distant parts of the globe, and therefore would not necessarily be linked or connected to Ukraine's missile tests. Although the story itself, the idea of a secret and unpublicized launch of 2 or more missiles to such extraordinary altitudes, and all of this happening without any publicity or public awareness whatsoever, well, it really does cause a certain kind of amazement, surprise, and wonder. And if it succeeded, then it's admiration. Because it confirms our state's status not just as an aircraft and engine building country, recognized for our long-standing expertise and tradition in these fields, but as a country that is now actively reclaiming everything we once had in terms of space exploration. This achievement demonstrates our ongoing commitment to restoring and advancing our capabilities in space, showing that we are determined to regain all that we accomplished in the past and to continue building on that legacy for the future.
One of the actively developing areas is the so-called air launch. During the war, Ukraine has already tested launching a carrier rocket from a transport plane at an altitude of about 8,000 meters. This approach allows bypassing the most difficult part of the flight, the dense layers of the atmosphere, and potentially increasing the strike range. This technology can also be used for launching satellites into orbit. And this is already part of a much larger strategy, creating our own space infrastructure.
The trajectories of such missiles pass at altitudes of over 100 kilometers, which effectively places them in outer space. At the same time, Ukraine's current air defense systems operate at lower altitudes, up to 30 to 40 kilometers. Therefore, the question of the need to create the space forces of the armed forces of Ukraine aims, among other things, at the legal recognition of the military's activities in a new military domain, space.
It is also known, as stated by Member of Parliament Fedor Venislavsky, that Ukraine plans to form a sovereign satellite constellation for communications, reconnaissance, and early warning of missile attacks. Currently, these functions are largely provided by partners. But dependence on external data is a risk that Kiev wants to minimize.
The Russian Federation still cannot create an engine of the same type as the one created at Yuzhmash for launching various types of missiles. A powerful engine. But not only the Russians can't do it, the Americans can't do it either. Because, well, by and large, an engine, a liquid propellant rocket engine, it's a very great art. In the field of engine building for space technology, Ukraine is still unsurpassed.
Ukraine also plans to deploy its own kinetic interceptors for fractional orbital missile systems like the Oreshnik even before their warheads separate in space. We are also talking about creating a separate branch, the Space Forces. This is needed in particular for operating in a new military sphere. After all, modern ballistic missiles can rise to an altitude of over 100 kilometers, effectively into space. At the same time, Ukrainian air defense today works effectively at lower altitudes.
If we're talking about it, the Israeli system suits us better in principle. But still, in order to develop it, it took about 8 years there, and it took about $7 billion. When we say that we are working on this, it means that we have such resources and we are investing these resources into this whole undertaking, into this research, into this development.
In parallel, Ukraine is scaling up other technologies as well. Every day, up to 1,500 interceptor drones are produced in the country. Ukrainian military personnel are also setting technological records. A soldier from the presidential brigade with the call sign Hulk managed to destroy 2 enemy Shahed-type drones at once at a distance of 500 kilometers from the launch site. Such an intercept is unique and the first of its kind in the world.
The Ukrainian defense industry is moving to a new level, from drones to ballistics and space. And although many developments remain classified, one thing is clear: technological warfare is becoming key.
The army needs replenishing, so in Russia they decided to pack the front with conscripts. 19-year-old conscripts from Yakutia are being pressured into signing contracts. Here is how Nikitka's mother sent him off, hoping he'd serve his time and be home in a year.
Well, he's dressed and has boots. The main thing is the phone, right? In a year, Nikita will be waiting for you. You hear, son? Yes, you can call us. You know, all the guys I see, they're actually all such young boys, really.
So, Nikita's appeal has appeared. He never even got to start his regular service. They forced him to sign a contract right away on the second day.
My son's a good boy, handsome, a real man.
Are they listening? Yes. Well, okay then, bye. So to speak, all the best. Mother of the year, clearly. But then she started complaining. How can this be? My son is so kind, what war?
The boy in the photo with glasses signed too. My son is actually the kindest person in the world. In 19 years of life, he's never even hit anyone. How can they send people like that to war, to kill people? They are only 19 years old.
But 19 or 49, it doesn't matter. The main thing is that he storms the positions. Though it's not certain they'll even bring Nikitka's body home, because there is no evacuation. Or he'll get out himself, like Svetlana's husband, who tried.
They try to roll out for the first time. They fail again, and they return to the point. There were 3 of them. My husband's leg, the second one has a shrapnel wound, but it's also a severe wound. And the third one's leg is just hanging by the tendons. They start to pull back for the second time on February 16th. There are only 2 of them pulling back now. The one with the leg hanging by tendons refuses to pull back. I don't know why. And so they started moving my husband and the other one. My husband loses consciousness. He felt unwell. And the second guy, well, he brought him back to the point. In the end, sometime later, I find out there were 2 evacuations. But those evacuation teams couldn't reach them at all. They were killed, those 2 evacuation crews.
In the end, the soldier was left in the field. He's a casualty because they couldn't get him out. They sent him into battle, but of course they didn't think about how to get him back.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine Today. Join us now.
Turkey might attack Israel. President Erdogan is considering such a possibility. What are the chances of such a development? How will this affect the situation in an already burning region? And most importantly, how will this affect the war in Ukraine? We have gathered all the available information.
A new conflict is brewing in the Middle East. Tensions are rising there between Turkey and Israel. So the Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu accused Turkish President Recep Erdogan of mass killings of his own Kurdish citizens and supporting the terrorist regime of Iran and its proxies. In turn, the Turkish Foreign Ministry didn't hold back either, calling Netanyahu the Hitler of our time.
We see that Israel may seek to declare Turkey a new adversary after Iran, as it cannot exist without an enemy.
The hostility between the two powerful countries could lead to almost open confrontation, some military analysts say. The situation escalated further last weekend when many media outlets, citing the British publication The Telegraph, published materials where Erdogan allegedly even threatened an invasion of Tel Aviv, to which he immediately received a sharp response from the Israeli Minister of National Security.
Erdogan, do you understand English?
It would seem that conflict is now inevitable. Turkey, which has the second largest army in the North Atlantic Alliance, will not tolerate this. However, as is often the case in the pursuit of loud headlines, Western media have significantly jumped the gun. Instead of military escalation, both sides limited themselves exclusively to mutual accusations and verbal threats against each other.
We reject any scenario that drags the states of the region into a destructive conflict.
Russia was particularly upset by the statement of the Turkish foreign minister. Kremlin propaganda has long been dreaming of how to drive a wedge between the two Ukrainian allies. On one hand, Turkey, which did not recognize Putin's annexation of Crimea and despite everything continues to build a military fleet for Kyiv. And on the other, Israel, which is quietly helping the armed forces of Ukraine with weapons and intelligence. And with their technologies. If these two Middle Eastern rivals were to clash in a fight, all this weaponry wouldn't be falling on the heads of Russian occupiers, but towards Ankara and Tel Aviv. But fortunately, Erdogan and Netanyahu are not that reckless.
Turkey will continue to use all diplomatic tools to counter this. In today's world, the battlefield is not only physical but also informational. We live in an era where the narrative has become as important and as fiercely contested as real events on the ground. Narratives are used as weapons to shape perception, interpretation, reality, and all too often to hide the truth itself.
So Israel and Turkey intend to fight exclusively in the informational and diplomatic fields.
Turkish-Israeli relations remain tense and essentially competitive, especially in the context of Israel's policy of encircling Turkey in the Mediterranean through cooperation with Greece and the Greek administration of southern Cyprus. In response, Turkey's growing influence in the Horn of Africa region and in the Sahel zone in both the military and political spheres. This creates a space in Israel's rear and undermines this policy of encirclement. Thus, every step by one side triggers a counterstep, or by the other, the struggle continues.
So a military conflict between Ankara and Tel Aviv is off the table, no matter how much some might want it. The Turkish Center for Combating Disinformation stated that claims of Erdogan threatening Israel with invasion are fake, and The Telegraph, which circulated the sensational news, based its report on statements Erdogan made 2 years ago, taken out of context. By the way, the article on the publication's website has also been deleted by now.
They wanted Kyiv in 3 days, but it's just not happening. Instead, they've been pushing in the Mala-Tokmachka area for a whole year.
In the Zaporizhia direction, positional battles took place near Lobkove-Stepov and on the outskirts of Mala-Tokmachka. Battles also continue on the outskirts of Mala-Tokmachka. Battles also continue in the Mala-Tokmachka area. Battles also continue on the outskirts of Mala-Tokmachka. There are also slight advances in Mala-Tokmachka. Our troops also have slight advances in the southeastern part of Mala-Tokmachka. Battles also continue for the southern part of Mala-Tokmachka. Battles are also underway for the southeastern part of Mala-Tokmachka. In the Mala-Tokmachka area, our troops have become more active. There are slight advances within the settlement itself. There are advances in the Mala-Tokmachka area. Battles are also ongoing in the Mala-Tokmachka area. There is also an advance in the Mala-Tokmachka area. The enemy acknowledges our advance in the Mala-Tokmachka area. Our troops also liberated Mala-Tokmachka yesterday. Also intensified fighting in the area of Novodanilivka and Mala-Tokmachka.
And it's like this every month? But what's going wrong? The army's supposedly second best and the bunker geostrategist calculated it all, but it's just not working out. And as it turns out, there are also problems with the commanders. But they've split into two separate castes. Some are just sending men to the slaughter. War correspondent Kotenok reported that commanders are destroying entire tank battalions by throwing tankers into meat grinder assaults.
3 platoons are already gone from the companies. They only exist on paper, but in reality, all the soldiers were sent to assault, died, or went missing. Now it's time for the 2nd platoon. Later, the battalion will likely be disbanded on paper. Since there are no people, there will be no tanks and no battalion.
Can you imagine? They're sending them to the slaughter? It's never happened before, and yet here we are again.
They told me that I wouldn't be participating in any combat operations, that I would be serving in the rear on Russian territory. In reality, I ended up on the territory of Ukraine. I asked everyone how this could be. I was promised one thing, to which they replied, laughing, "You wanted to make some easy money."
But Russian soldiers really did want to make some easy money, but it ended up being hardcore. But there's another cast of Russian commanders, let's just say, lovers of carnal pleasures. It's not the first time Russian war correspondents and journalists have complained that commanders want to, shall we say, screw over Russian soldiers.
Judging by the information that is currently at my disposal, it appears that the regiment commander allegedly not only exceeded his official powers, but also, in addition to that, subjected the victim to other sexual acts. I could be wrong about something, of course, but I've never seen greater cynicism or more mockery toward our true combat officers, who've essentially given their whole lives to serving the motherland.
And then we see videos like this from the dugouts, trained, so to speak.
And you're going to work, huh? What?
Turn the music up.
Turn on the music.
Yeah, because now I'm going to start on him hard.
Poisons for Navalny, the Skripals, Kara-Murza, and other enemies of the Putin regime were produced in the same place, the Signal Research Center. And the creation of this enterprise was personally initiated by the Kremlin dictator. Who works there and how? How Putin's secret poison lab is organized, and how the poisons are tested on humans. More on that next.
Epibetadine is a frog poison that killed the Russian opposition leader Navalny. And the poison Novichok was used to poison the former intelligence officer Sergei Skripal. These deadly poisons were synthesized at the Signal Research Center, which was established in 2010 by the direct order of Vladimir Putin. In essence, Signal is a secret research center for the development of poisons. Currently, about 500 people work there. The center is managed by a directorate that includes 5 scientists and 1 former FSB officer. The head is Artur Zhirov, a specialist in the analytical chemistry of toxic substances. In the past, he worked at the Ministry of Defense's 27th Scientific Center and the 33rd Central Institute of the Ministry of Defense.
Among the center's departments are 4 research ones, 1 research and production, and the Department for Clinical Research and Trials. The staffing of the departments indicates that Signal can synthesize small amounts of toxic substances, check if they are easy to detect, conduct tests on animals, and possibly even on humans. Attempting to edit genes, agentstvo.
In 1997, the Chemical Weapons Convention came into force. This international treaty prohibits the development, production, stockpiling, and use of chemical weapons, requiring its complete destruction under supervision. And Russia joined this convention, but purely formally.
The thing is that Russia was joined this convention only in order to destroy all junk. These Novichok ones, the series of agents that were produced there, they remained. Russia never actually presented the stockpiles of this weapon for destruction as required.
The Signal Division specializes in working with organophosphorus poisons, including substances of the Novichok group, biotoxins and nanotechnologies. The presence of qualified doctors and medical staff on staff may indicate that the center is monitoring the effects of poisons on animals and possibly even on the human body. So, is it possible that in Russia, the process of improving these so-called poisons and testing them on animals is still ongoing?
Well, I think why not? Because the convention allows it. It's quite legal.
In parallel with Signal, the State Research and Testing Institute of Military Medicine is working in this direction. Since 2015, they have been regularly testing drugs and the impact of weapons on military personnel there. The head of the institute himself, Sergei Chapur, spoke about what these tests are at a conference of the Russian military in 2023.
Experimental sites were organized at the training ground, imitating military fortifications, Russian and NATO ones, as well as elements of equipment.
To determine the effectiveness of munitions, the psychophysiological and cardiovascular activity of the subjects was studied right at the training ground. Necessary samples were taken, and the dependence of body function disorders was determined using a special scale. On the distance of the shot from guns of 122 and 300 mm caliber, Sergei Chepur, head of the Research Institute of Military Medicine.
The conference materials state that during the tests, volunteers began to have blood pressure problems, including critical changes in the vascular and nervous systems, suppression of sensory and logical functions, and more.
In the future, this will allow the use of munitions to suppress enemy manpower with guaranteed damage of at least a medium level of severity, the conference materials state.
Such research has been conducted there since 2018. The institute opened a scientific and clinical center with 100 beds. The center has an intensive care unit, therapeutic and surgical departments, and an anesthesiology and resuscitation group. That is, scientists monitor the effects of various poisons and psychotropic substances on the human body. According to investigative journalists, the head of the Institute of Military Medicine, Sergei Chepur, has direct links to participants in operations related to the poisoning of the Skripals. And since the start of the full-scale invasion of Ukraine, Russia has already used banned chemical weapons at the front thousands of times.
That was the news for today, but I'm not saying goodbye to you yet. In just a couple of hours on the program in Trend, I'll tell you about how Victoria Bonya brought Telegram back to Russia, how Simonian goes to bed with a dead man, and Zelensky is called a drug addict about the attack on Lenin, and more. See you soon.